Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Armel Dozion, and hopefully you are doing well for yourself. You, your friends, your family, whether you live in the States or internationally, you're doing fine for yourself, you're healthy, and everything's going well for you. At the very least in your personal life, because things right now in the States are very uncertain. But one thing that is very certain is the fact that Fight Island has finally been revealed. For months, people have been joking about Fight Island. Is it even a real thing? Is this coming straight out of a movie? Where is Fight Island? Where is this mystical, magical, mysterious island that nobody except for the top people in the UFC knows? Well, it's been revealed. It's been revealed, according to Dana White, that Fight Island will take place in Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. My home, Abu Dhabi. So I'm really happy for that. For those of you who don't know, Abu Dhabi, where I grew up on, we were all huge combat sports fans. As well as Abu Dhabi has a very significant percentage of Filipinos. There are a lot of Filipinos who live in the Abu Dhabi area. And in that area, they're huge fans of like Manny Pacquiao, boxing, mixed martial arts. You'd be surprised. One championship is very popular in Abu Dhabi. So once again, because me being a Filipino there, and Filipinos being a very prevalent race in Abu Dhabi, combat sports is very popular there. So I am not surprised of this. But let's look at the fight card here. What do we have coming from Abu Dhabi? We got Kumaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns for the World Welterweight Championship. Can you believe that? Gilbert Burns, he's going to be, if hopefully he fights his fights, if nothing goes wrong, everyone is healthy, Fight Island continues on, it's being pushed forward, nothing bad happens, no one gets injured, Gilbert Burns would have fought 4 times in the last 9 months. And saying Gilbert Burns wasn't even near the top 10 rankings early this year. And look what happened. It's insane how fast and how quick Gilbert Burns has pushed up. If 2019 was the year of Jorge Masvidal, 2020 was the year of Gilbert Burns. And we got Volkanovski versus Holloway 2 for the World Featherweight Championship. That's going to be a really fun one. Volkanovski, in my personal opinion, has to be one of the more underrated fighters in all of the UFC. The guy is so good, but he'll be coming into this fight as the least popular fighter compared to somebody like Max Holloway, who by many accounts is widely regarded as one of the greatest of all time in the featherweight division. And I really can't argue about that. And I think if Volkanovski can defeat Holloway this second time around, I think it definitely places him ahead of everyone else in the division, and in terms of history of the featherweight division. Then we got Peter Yan versus Jose Aldo for the vacant World Bantamweight title. This is very interesting here in that Jose Aldo, he was initially scheduled to go fight against Henry Cejudo, but because of some complications that were happening, Jose Aldo couldn't participate in this fight, and international fighting is very complicated. Dana White talked about this, how it was difficult to push fighters from international countries to come into the States as of right now because of the whole coronavirus pandemic. It is noted that as I am speaking right now, currently, at least in California, things are getting a lot less strict. Currently right now, Nevada and Florida are the 2 states that are pushing headfirst as it pertains to reopening. New York is at the process of reopening right now. California being one of the more liberal states out there of all of America, arguably the most liberal leftist state in all of America, they definitely will be one of the last states to be reopening up. I currently, as of right now, I'm living in Northern California, the Stockton area. I live in Stockton. And so I'm about 2 hours away from the San Francisco Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, And there's just so much money coming through the Silicon Valley and the San Francisco area that sadly, that state is going to reopen up a lot more later compared to its Southern California counterpart. So, I'm just throwing it out there right now that some states are not reopening, but some states are. And I think by end of next month, we can expect almost all the states to reopen. With the exception of San Francisco, just because San Francisco is the San Francisco Silicon area is such a unique part of America that it's definitely going to be in the tail end as it pertains to like having people come in, having workers go in, just because there's so much money flowing in and out of that zone. And then we also have one of my personal favorites here, Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas 2. Are we finally going to see Namajunas make her big return? I really don't know. I'm looking at this card, Andrade versus Namajunas, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, this might be the most hyped fight I am most interested in. I believe so. I believe Namajunas versus Andrade could be fight of the night. Not only that, I think this could be a make or break for more than any other fighter, because I believe if Burns were to lose against Usman, Burns still made his way to top 5. If Holloway were to lose against Volkanovski, Holloway is still one of the all-time greats. Andrade versus Rose Namajunas, both of these fighters are in a specific part of their careers right now. Rose Namajunas, I don't know what's going on with her mentally and psychologically. Dan White has talked about it, in that everyone wants to see Rose Namajunas compete. Everyone wants to see Rose Namajunas fight, because she is without doubt one of the best in the division. But how is she doing mentally? How is she doing, like, psychologically? I'm not really sure, because when she pulled out on her fight, she's pulled out on the fight against Weili Zhang because she just wasn't comfortable with it. Then she had a fight against Jessica Andrade. She had to pull out from that because coronavirus, which is very understandable. And now we got another fight coming up here with Namajunas versus Andrade too. I don't know what to expect. I really don't. And also for the fact that Rose Namajunas, unlike many fighters, is a very introverted, quiet person, and that she's not putting out herself that much. So when I'm typing up and looking into, okay, why is Rose Namajunas not able to perform, blah, 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 how's she doing right now, how's she doing in her training camp? Like, she's participating in training camp, but nobody in her training camp is letting out any information. We now know that Rose Namajunas pulled out the Jessica Andrade fight because of the coronavirus pandemic issue, but they were very quiet when she was given the opportunity to fight against Weili Zhang. So what's going on with Rose Namajunas? I'm unsure. But who do I expect to win this fight? Well, I feel like the best version of Jessica Andrade versus the best version of Rose Namajunas. Andrade defeated the best version of Namajunas, but that wasn't. I'm not going to reward Andrade that much. I'll put that more as Rose Namajunas, in terms of strategy, came into that fight with the wrong strategy. Namajunas was trying to bait Andrade into a ground slam so she can pull off a submission move. I think that was just the wrong idea. Namajunas was beating out Andrade in every facet of the game. The only thing that she wasn't really winning on was in the clinch, and all because she had the opportunity to go for a flash submission move onto Andrade, and Namajunas missed out on that. She tried to replicate it again in the second round. That didn't turn out well for Namajunas. That was poor strategy by Namajunas, and if she were to keep pace and kept it on, if she were to just primarily keep it on the feet, striking primarily, she could have won the fight. She really could have. I felt like when Namajunas let herself down in that fight. And also, Namajunas has talked about after the fight that she doesn't enjoy fighting anymore. She's in that same realm of Tyron Woodley. And Tyron Woodley, he doesn't enjoy fighting at all. You can tell by his body language, how he talks about his fighting career, he doesn't enjoy it at all. And for Namajunas, I'm kind of getting a little bit of that. And she's made a lot of money in her career as a fighter that she can really retire right now if she wants to. She really can. And they got here Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt. I expect Ribas to win this, but what makes this matchup very interesting to me is the fact that Paige Van Zandt, who's been trying to buy her way into... She's been trying to finish her contract. She's been stuck at this one-fight contract for the better part of 2 years. If you talk to Paige Van Zandt or listen to any of her interviews, or if you follow her on social media, Paige Van Zandt really doesn't care about the rankings. She really isn't. She's currently competing in the flyweight rankings right now that's being dominant by Valentina Shevchenko. I'll love to see Paige Van Zandt versus Valentina Shevchenko, all because that those two are without a doubt the most popular fighters in the fight division. Problem though right now is that if you look at Paige Van Zandt and her social media and all her interviews, she's constantly talking about how much she herself doesn't really enjoy what she's doing as it pertains to fighter economics. And her contract right now. She's been stuck at this one fight contract for about 2 years, and the reason why she can't fulfill her contract and get a new contract, it's been here. Like Dana White's saying, okay, I understand fighters like John Jones or Jorge Masvidal, they want to renegotiate the contract, but they just recently re-signed their contract, so we can't change that. Paige Van Zandt, she's been stuck at her contract for years now. And so Van Zandt, win or loss, in my opinion, I don't think Van Zandt really cares all about that much about the result. I think she cares about finishing up this fight, signing a new contract, and then being focused on, okay, let me actually try to work my way up the rankings here. I expect Ribas to win this. I believe Amanda Ribas is more focused on elevating her stock in the rankings than Paige Van Zandt is, and that's why I'm putting my money on her. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after the short break here.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
And we are back. And so Fight Island will indeed be a real thing. Fight Island will take place at Yas Island at Abu Dhabi. There will be 4 cards happening in the month of July at Fight Island. Dana White himself says that he's gonna be involved himself with 3 of them, and the 4th one he's gonna get out there. But with the way how Dana White talks about Fight Island, he's pulling out a mega card here. So for the first event of Fight Island, we have Kumaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns, Volkanovski versus Holloway 2, Peter Yan versus Jose Aldo, Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas 2, and Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt. This card looks stacked. It's a card full of incredibly good fighters here, and I really do expect a lot more coming up in the month of July. It was also announced by Dana White that he's pushing for Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. No, he finished negotiating for Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic happening in the month of August. So we can expect that to happen. Now, what else is going to happen in the month of July for Fight Island? I'm unsure, but I'm very excited for UFC 251. And so let's discuss all these fights here. We have Kumaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns. Wow. Just wow. Gilbert Burns, in the span of 9 months, has elevated his stock immensely. Immensely. It started off with his victory over Gunnar Nelson back in September, and then he defeated Damian Maia. He then defeated Tyron Woodley in an upset fight, and now he's going to fight the world champion. Can you believe it? He defeated a wily veteran, a legend, one of the all-time greats, and now he's fighting against the world champion here. Now, who's going to win this fight? Sorry, Gilbert Burns goes into all his fights, with the exception of the Damian Maia fight, as an underdog. That's the real truth here. Gilbert Burns has the complete MMA game, and it's so shocking on how fast he's been elevating in the division that it's hard to believe it. It's really hard to believe, because Gilbert Burns, when he fought against Tyron Woodley, nobody expected Burns to win. Nobody. Again, I'll scratch that. The majority of people expected Tyron Woodley to win. I predicted Tyron Woodley would defeat Gilbert Burns, because I argued that the very best version of Tyron Woodley, a motivated Tyron Woodley, would defeat Gilbert Burns. Now, we can argue whether or not Tyron Woodley was motivated to compete against Burns that night, considering the fact that Tyron Woodley has a history of extensively talking about how much he doesn't like mixed martial arts, and that his motivation for the fight game has dwindled a lot. So are we seeing the best version of Tyron Woodley? I'm not really sure. But Gilbert Burns defeated one of the all-time great champions in the welterweight division in Tyron Woodley. A complete package, a complete fighter in Tyron Woodley. And when you look at the performance of Burns, you're like, wow, this guy doesn't have a single negative aspect to his fight game. He can strike you. He's got power. He can angle a shot. He's got speed. He's got grappling. Coming to the UFC, Gilbert Burns was a jiu-jitsu practitioner for the most part. He was primarily just a jiu-jitsu guy work some wrestling, work some Muay Thai, work some boxing, work some kickboxing. Gilbert Burns can do everything and anything in the octagon. And even then, it's hard for me to put my stock on him. It really is. Because he's fighting against Kumaru Usman, who, just like Gilbert Burns, has great striking and is probably one of the best, if not the best wrestler in the entire welterweight division. I'd argue that Kumaru Usman has to be one of the top 5 best wrestlers in all the UFC. So who's going to win? So when you look at Burns versus Kumaru Usman, it can really go either way. If these two fighters were to fight one another 100 times, I am not worried. I'm pretty 100% sure here that Burns would defeat Usman a handful of times. I think Gilbert Burns has the grappling ability to take on somebody as good as Kumaru Usman. I think Gilbert Burns hits a little bit much more harder and is a little bit more quicker than Usman. But here's the thing, Usman's a warrior, man. Usman is a walking tank. He's got an iron chin, and he can go on for 5 rounds. But the same thing you can say about the same thing for Gilbert Burns, though. When Kumaru Usman defeated Tyron Woodley and Colby Covington in championship rounds, championship fights, Usman kept the exact same pace. He's a cardio freak. The guy's a cardio machine. He can keep going on the same pace. And the exact same thing was said about Gilbert Burns. I remember in the last round, in the 5th round, when it was Gilbert Burns versus Tyron Woodley, Daniel Cormier was talking about how Gilbert Burns was taking the risk. Gilbert Burns, after decisively defeating Tyron Woodley after 4 rounds, you would think, okay, the person who's falling behind, they're going to be the aggressors here. No. When the bell rang, Gilbert Burns put all the pressure on Woodley. Woodley's back was always on the cage. There wasn't a single instance in that fight to which Gilbert Burns wasn't applying a lot of pressure onto Woodley that forced Woodley to press his back onto the cage, and Burns was just pressuring him for 5 rounds. Here's the interesting part. Usman fought somebody very similar to Burns, Colby Covington. Colby Covington is a fine striker, and Colby Covington is known for his relentless pace, for putting the pressure onto his opponents. And look what happened. Usman was able to stop him. He was able to outstrike Colby Covington. Now, who's a better striker, Gilbert Burns or Colby Covington? In my personal opinion, how I view it, I think Gilbert Burns has the edge over Colby. This is definitely the right booking. When you say who could have fought against Kumaru Usman, we got Jorge Masvidal, Tyron Woodley, Colby Covington, and now Gilbert Burns. And Gilbert Burns, in my opinion, was the right choice. He really was. And here's the thing about Gilbert Burns. Here's a strange thing. Gilbert Burns, he's been accepting all these impromptu fights with just a couple months of prep time. With just a couple months. Burns challenged Tyron Woodley. After Burns defeated Damian Maia, he challenged Tyron Woodley the night of. And he had 1 month of prep time to fight against the former world champion. And he defeated him. Burns is going on in this insane pace. I've never seen a fighter go as fast as Burns did in the traditional sense. I know there's like fighters like Conor McGregor and like Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey who's been accelerated up to the top. But Gilbert Burns, off him just saying, yes, I will fight that person. Yes, I don't care if I have 1 month prep time. Yes, I will accept the fight. Yes, I will take the pressure of hoping to go make weight by fight night. And just 1 month's prep time. Insane. It's absolutely insane. Who do I put my money in? I'm going to put my money in currently right now towards Usman. Yeah, I'm going to put my money towards Usman. Even though I've been talking a lot about Gilbert Burns, the reason why I am going to select Usman versus Gilbert Burns is off the basis that I think Gilbert Burns, in terms of striking ability, Burns and Usman are within the same level. In terms of grappling, I had to put my money on Usman. And the reason for that is because in the recent fights of Burns hasn't been really grappling all that much. He really isn't. When I see Usman, I see the complete game. When I say Gilbert Burns, I see a grappler turn to a striker who sometimes uses his grappling. He sometimes uses grappling. It feels like he's very over-reliant on his striking nowadays. Gilbert Burns is. And because of that, I felt like when it's Usman versus Burns, Burns is going to go try to strike Usman, and Usman can go for a double leg takedown. And although Burns having the jiu-jitsu background, he can definitely defend himself. I'm not saying that he can't. I'm not saying Gilbert Burns can't outdo whatever Kumaru Usman can do. It's just when I look back at Gilbert Burns' fights compared to Kumaru Usman's fights, Kumaru Usman, he can grapple you and he can stand up with you. Burns, he can grapple you and he can stand up with you also. But if you're to choose either or, he would choose striking. And I'd rather put my money on the guy who has a fine balance of both fighting styles instead of just one. Can Gilbert Burns defeat Kumaru Usman? 100%. If you were to bet money on Gilbert Burns defeating Kumaru Usman, I won't be shocked, and I'm not going to disagree with you. Gilbert Burns can definitely 100% defeat Kumaru Usman. Just in this scenario, right now, for my gut feeling, my intuition is telling me Kumaru Usman is going to win this fight. It's not going to end by knockout, not going to end by submission. It's going to be a grind-out war. And whoever can win in the first 2 rounds pretty much wins the entire fight. The person who dictates their pace, especially in the grappling department, they're the ones who I believe are going to win the fights. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after the short break here.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So, I'm discussing here UFC 251 and the existence of Fight Island. I've talked about Gilbert Burns versus Kumaru Usman, and now we have Volkanovski versus Holloway. It is their second bout here, to which Volkanovski won. A small part of me wants Holloway to win, but based off the performance that Holloway had against Volkanovski, to which Volkanovski pretty much outplayed him in every category of the striking game, he's completely outpaced him. I think Holloway came into that fight a little bit too cocky, in my personal opinion, the way how I viewed it. It happens towards a lot of champions, in that they gain this weird impervious level of impervious shield, and after Holloway lost his opportunity to go for the second strap, I only believe that Holloway is kind of going towards a downturn of his career. He lost in his recent attempt to go for a second strap, and lost to Volkanovski. And then when I look at Volkanovski versus Holloway, when I look at the stock and the trajectory for both fighters, I just see Volkanovski going up. I just can't really feasibly see, in terms of striking and clinch aspect, how Holloway can outperform Volkanovski. I don't know, because you can't argue. Even though Holloway is the more popular fighter, and Volkanovski came to the fight as the underdog, and I really thought Holloway would go win the fight. From that performance against Volkanovski and Holloway in their first bout, I really think that Volkanovski's got Holloway's game here, and I can expect. Here's the thing: I really expect this fight to be a lot more closer, a lot more tougher for both fighters. I think Holloway will have a more better performance compared to his last one. But then Volkanovski will be a little bit more tight in the second bout here. And off that basis, I believe Volkanovski is going to defeat Holloway by decision. I'm not sure if it can be unanimous or split decision, but for Holloway, you really don't know how close this fight can be. I gotta go for Volkanovski. I do. The reason for that is because for Holloway, in his recent fight against Volkanovski, when it starts getting towards the middle to end of the third round, I have to kind of put my money towards Volkanovski, because Holloway doesn't, even though Holloway is a great cardio freak, he pretty much burns his load within the first 2 rounds in the early part of the third round. And if Volkanovski can go maintain a certain pace through all 5 rounds like he did in the last time they fought, I see Volkanovski wins this, without doubt. And then for the other fights of the card, here we got Peter Yan versus Jose Aldo. I'm kind of iffy on the Jose Aldo train. I know if you look at the history of Jose Aldo, he is one of the all-time greats. He's practically a living legend. But when I compare him to Peter Yan, I'm thinking right now, Jose Aldo kind of is in a downturn of his career while it's time for Petr Yan. I won't be surprised if in the betting odds, Petr Yan will be considered the favorite of this fight, but even then, this fight has the potential to be the best fight of the entire night. But right now, I'm kind of more lenient on Petr Yan. And then we have Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. This fight's very interesting in that when you look at the last fight between Andrade and Rose Namajunas, here's a strange part. A lot of people considered Namajunas to be the underdog in that fight. She really is. Namajunas, despite defeating the strawweight queen, that was Joanna Jędrzejczyk, a lot of people thought Andrade was going to defeat Namajunas. And the reason why people thought Andrade would win the fights was because Andrade was seen as the better, more stronger striker out of the two. Before their fight even happened, the prediction was Andrade in the stand-up and Andrade on the ground game was superior than Namajunas. And then let's go to the actual fights. As it pertains to the actual fights, Namajunas was doing a better job against Jessica Andrade in the stand-up. Not only that, Namajunas was doing better in terms of preventing Andrade going for a takedown and the clinching. Namajunas was outperforming Jessica Andrade in every facet of the fight game. The only reason why Namajunas lost that fight against Andrade was because it was in the first round that Namajunas did so good and so well for herself that she almost was able to accomplish a submission hold. I think it was either an armbar or a triangle coming from a big slam takedown. So Andrade went for a slam on Namajunas. Namajunas could have got a submission hold coming in from the slam, and Namajunas was very close to getting it, but she slipped. In my personal, the way how I viewed it, Namajunas slipped and she couldn't get a complete grasp or control of the triangle choke in. And because of that, it gave Andrade enough time to recover. And then they went back to standing up. So, Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. The prediction was Andrade was going to defeat Namajunas in every facet of the fight game. Namajunas was beating Andrade, actually, in every facet of the fight game. And then when it went to the second round, everyone can agree. Daniel Cormier, Joe Rogan, Dominic Cruz, everyone can agree that Namajunas unanimously defeated Jessica Andrade. And that one round was without doubt the best round in terms of striking, in terms of grappling, in Namajunas' career. And then she became way too reckless. She became too aggressive in that, you know what, I almost got a submission hold when she attempted a slam on me. So this time, when she attempts a slam on me again, which will probably happen because I'm beating her in the striking exchange, in the striking game, I'm going to go and pull up the submission and win the bout. And she did it again. But unlike the last slam, this slam was a lot more harder, and Nami just couldn't take it. Namajunas lost through the slam because she was way too... She thought she could pull off this submission hold move, but at the cost of placing her at a huge risk. It was a huge risk for Namajunas to take. And all of a sudden, this girl, who many consider to be the second best women's fighter in the entire world, well, she lost her belt. And now we have Andrade versus Namajunas 2. And the way how I look at it right now, I wouldn't be surprised if either fighter were to win, because at their very best, if Namajunas and Andrade were to fight each other 100 times, most of the time, Namajunas would win, if the two were fighting at their very best. Namajunas right now, how is she doing mentally, psychologically? I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what's going on in the Namajunas camp. She's been pulling out of fights. It's reasonable why she would pull out the fight against Jessica Andrade, because it was at the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. But I really don't know what to expect from Namajunas in this fight. I know what to expect from Jessica Andrade. I just don't know what to expect from Namajunas. How will that fight end? It could end first round. It could end in a second round TKO. It could end in a slam for all we know. I say, when I look at these two fighters here, they're both going to fight a lot more passive and a lot more safe compared to the last ones. Because Andrade, she got knocked out by Weili Zhang because she was way too aggressive in her striking. Namajunas was just way too aggressive and had too much overconfidence in her grappling ability. So Andrade and Almeida fight yet again. This could be a first round KO, it could be a second round TKO, could end after decision. I don't know what to expect from this fight, and it's the biggest question mark fight of the entire card. And then we have Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt. This is also kind of a question mark, because I know what to expect from Ribas. I don't know what to expect from Van Zandt. Ribas is in the top 10. She's in the top 10 of the fight division. There's no reason why Ribas should even be fighting Paige Van Zandt, other than to possibly raise the stock of Paige Van Zandt if Van Zandt were to win. Also, I consider it kind of a freebie win for Ribas. Amanda Ribas should defeat Paige Van Zandt. But Van Zandt, man, she's a killer. People make fun of her all the time by saying, oh, look at her, she's a model. She's a pretty girl. She's an Instagrammer. She's an influencer. She shouldn't be in the octagon. And it's hard to compare Paige Van Zandt to a wrestler of peers without talking about how Paige Van Zandt is in her comparison to Sage Northcutt. She's the female Sage Northcutt. Two pretty-looking, attractive fighters who appeal to a very young demographic, appeal to a very different audience if you look at social media, if you look at both of their Instagrams. She's a special fighter in terms of marketing. My sister, who watches mixed martial arts, she doesn't like Paige Van Zandt. And the reason why she doesn't like her is because she doesn't look like she belongs there. And if you follow Paige Van Zandt in a recent interview on social media, it doesn't feel like she has the passion for mixed martial arts. She's just doing this. She's admitted that she's just doing this fight. Not specifically the Amanda Ribas fight, but she's just accepting whatever fight that's given to her because she wants to finish up her contract. She wants to finish up her contract, renegotiate, and potentially make more money. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back after the short break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back. So while Dana White was talking about UFC 251 on ESPN, he's hyping up the card, he's hyping up Fight Ireland. We got 4 cards coming up in the month of July for Fight Ireland. We've got a super card involving champions and former champions and returns of fighters. But while he was talking at ESPN, while he's been going on radio interviews, some things have been brought up constantly. And these things involve economics. I've talked about fighter economics many times. I dedicated half an hour about fighter economics in the last episode of the GSMC MMA podcast. And we got Jorge Masvidal and Jon Jones being very outspoken. Not just him. We got former women's fighters, UFC fighters, who left the UFC talking about their complaints about money economics. We got fighters like Tito Ortiz. Fighters like Josh Koscheck. There have been a plethora of fighters who've complained about money in the UFC, how much money they're making. From Brock Lesnar, to Ronda Rousey, to Conor McGregor, to Jon Jones, Gustafsson, top fighters, Jorge Masvidal. There are a lot of top fighters who've constantly thrown their name out there and have talked extensively about how much money they're making. And unlike other sporting events, unlike other sporting organizations, UFC is pretty closed off as it pertains to putting out their economics in public. Dana White has gone on and said that, these fighters here, they make really good money. But do they make really good money relative to other athletes? That's the big question here. Because here's the truth. In America, I'm talking specifically to the American audience here, that there was a survey that went out there by Pew Research Center, which is a highly respectable source in terms of information and data and statistics. To be considered rich, to be considered really well off for yourself, to be considered financially stable in America, you got to make six figures, $100,000. Do people know what the average salary is? The average household income per house in America? About $65,000. To be considered normal, average in your household, you have to make about $65K a year. Household income. So let's say you are living with your spouse. You make $30,000, which isn't a lot. And then your spouse makes $40,000. Not that much also. Together, you're making above the average salary of the average household right there. Me being a person who studied in Northern California, in the Silicon Valley, and the San Francisco area, and also as an avid fan of basketball, understanding economics is night and day when you compare the state of California and the media world relative to everything else. And what I mean by that is because in the Silicon Valley, the average salary of the average household income there is $250,000 in the Palo Alto area. Palo Alto. San Francisco, $135,000. Household income, average base salary. If you were to bring the majority of the fighters from the UFC and they were to be tossed into the Silicon Valley, into the Palo Alto area, into the NorCal spectrum of the Bay Area, they'll be considered poor. And then you bring up, other sports. We've got players in baseball making upwards of $100 million, $300 million. We've got basketball players who are making $200 million. And that's their base salary. Base salary, $200 million. There are rookies, 19, 18-year-old, 21-year-old kids coming from college, moving into the National Basketball Association. And you know what their salaries are? If you're among the top five, if you're top five of the draft, this 18 to 21-year-old age kid can make anything upwards of $7 million base salary. Base. So you mean to tell me this kid, 18, 21 years old, playing basketball, his future within the organization isn't even all that, which his future is pretty much an unknown. We got players like Greg Oden, Zion Williamson, Hashim Thabit. I'm not throwing Zion Williamson as being as bad as those other players. But we have athletes in the National Basketball Association to which you don't know what their actual ceiling is, what they're actually going to produce in the organization. Yet, they're being paid multiples of what top fighters in the UFC make. Now, if I were to talk to Dana White, he would say, well, Mr. De Leon, you're full of it. You don't know what the actual salary is. You don't know the actual literal money. Okay, I agree with you. I don't know what the precise money is. All I can do right now is go based off information and see what the estimated makings for these fighters here. Todd Duffy, who is kind of a bigger name, that's in the heavyweight division at one point, he was barely making ends meet. Barely was. We as fight fans know that some of these fighters are making $13,000 to $16,000 a year. It was reported out there that Michelle Watterson made about $60K. She made a $60K in her fights. And some of these fighters fight only once, sometimes twice a year. And you know what? I always say this. All fighters should try to fight 2 times a year. So you're always guaranteed to make 6 figures if you are in the middle of the road. If you're in the middle of the road. Like if you're a Michelle Watterson or an Anthony Pettis or Don Cerrone, you should fight twice a year. So you get that guaranteed 6 figures. Now, 6 figures is small money. It's small chump change in the grand scheme of things. I got friends in higher places here who are a lot younger, who are very, very young, not even 25 years old, And they make about $300,000 a year. $300,000 a year. Not even 25 multiple friends. And, well, they're pretty off for themselves, right? They're really well off for themselves. They really are. So why the heck is it that my friends, who are doing pretty well for themselves, making $300K a year, who are just another employee. They work for Google and Facebook. They're just another employee. And then we have the UFC, the largest mixed martial arts organization in the world. How the heck they put more risk in their bodies? They're taking more chances out there going into the octagon, yet their money isn't all that well. I would love to live in a world where all mixed martial arts fighters can make 6 figs, but that's not how really things work. Now, Dana White has said, well, these fighters here, John Jones, Jorge Masvidal, they signed multi-year contracts. They signed multi-year contracts recently, so they are not in any position to renegotiate. Jorge Masvidal throws a statistic out there, and that 16% of the money of the entire revenue for the UFC only goes to the fighters. So 84% goes to everyone else within the organization. In my mind, I'm like, that's not fair. Fighters should do a better job renegotiating the contracts. And I think Dana White would agree to that. I think Dana would agree. Look, if these fighters genuinely believe they want to make X money, then negotiate and convince me to why I should pay that money. If X fighter says he wants $3 million, $5 million, $10 million, $12 million, then negotiate that. But don't be like, okay, I'm going to sign an 8-fight contract and I'll be paid $200,000 per fight or $400,000 per fight. If you accept that, you're pretty much placing a small ceiling on what you can do. Now, you could. Here's the thing about the really messed up part about mixed martial arts. They could just say no to you, and you can be left jobless. You can negotiate, fail, and have no job in the end. But that's the role. That's the role of sports goes, and that's why unionization is important. You don't get this stuff from the NHL, from the NBA to the NFL to the MLB. Right now, currently in the NBA, it's considered an issue. Players and athletes have too much power. That's a criticism. Players have too much free will and free choice. They have too much negotiating power. Currently in the National Basketball Association. And I like to live in a world where mixed martial arts fighters could have the same leverage as LeBron James, as a Chris Paul, as a Stephen Curry. But that's not going to happen anytime soon from where I'm standing right now. And I'm going to get into it later. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back after the short break here.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And so we are back. Dana White has talked about UFC 251. He's hyping up the event. But upon hyping up UFC 251 and Fight Island and 4 fight cards coming up in the month of July, many are asking Dana White, what's going on in terms of fighters making money? Dana White's response is, well, these fighters are making a lot of good money. They're making good enough money for them to sustain themselves for a while, for a long time. And you know what? Making $200,000, that's really good. That's really, really good. Average American household salary, $65K. A fighter who makes $200K, they just made about 4 times the salary. That's not including advertising or sponsorship deals. So yeah, I agree with you. A fighter making $200,000 is a whole lot of money. A fighter who makes $125,000 is a whole lot of money. A fighter making $70,000 is a lot of money. But relative, I'm talking about how relative UFC fighters are in terms of their economics compared to everything else. Because yes, UFC it's a big pond It's a big fish in a small pond. It's a big fish in a small pond in the world of mixed martial arts. But if you were to have the top fighters, here's the thing. If you were to compare like the amount of money Dana White, Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, John Jones, Amanda Nunes, if you compare the money they make at a per year basis, then you compare them to other athletes from other sports, and I'm not saying like the top athletes, I mean just general athletes. There are a lot of the middle of the road, low tier athletes who make bank a lot of money. There are mediocre athletes who make bank money and can get away with it. And currently right now, there's still inflation happening, so it's expected more athletes from other organizations who are not at the highest tier. You don't have to be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Drew Brees to make a whole lot of money. I talked about it before the commercial break. We have 18 to 21-year-olds who are making nearly $10 million a year. Nearly $10 million a year. Who don't have a clear ceiling. Are just becoming professional athletes for the first time, and they're making nearly $10 million. That is insane. Meanwhile, UFC, here's the thing you gotta think about when it comes to Dana White. What Dana White's saying is not wrong. He is not wrong at all. If these fighters believe they are worth X amount of money, they should renegotiate. Are these fighters living above average in terms of how much money they're making relative to everyone else? Every normal human being in America? Yes, these fighters are making a whole lot more money. John Jones is living a life I wish I had. I got a lot of friends who are also rich, who wish they made as much money as John Jones has, working for the UFC. But John Jones is still chump change compared to other athletes. WWE wrestlers make more money than UFC fighters. And they're fake. How the heck is that possible? And then this leads me to thinking about why this is. Why is it? Because Nate Diaz, he merely made fun of Kumaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns. Like he retweeted a photo of it, and then he put down text saying, "This is why fighters don't make a lot of money. Is because they willingly accept whatever fight is brought into them without really going further deep into negotiating." Now, I don't completely agree with Nate Diaz considering the fact that he's lost money. He lost opportunities to make a whole lot of money because he's stuck in negotiating mode. But I really do believe I'm kind of in agreement with Nate Diaz to an extent in that if more fighters were open to negotiate and were open to supporting one another in their negotiations, these fighters would be making a lot more money. Fighters would make a lot more. American Top, I don't know why no one from American Top Team is supporting one another as it pertains to negotiating their contracts. I don't get why there aren't multiple camps from freaking Jackson Wink or American Top Team or Team Alpha Male. Why they're not working together in order to push their fighters to make more money. They're not doing that. The reality, the truth is, a lot of mixed martial arts fighters, especially in the UFC, especially in that welterweight division, are full of divas. And full of divas and fighters looking out for number one. When I am thinking about fighter economics, my idea and unionization, I immediately thought of Chael Sonnen. He was the first thing that came up in my head. People are bringing up Jorge Masvidal, John Jones, Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, Fedor Emelianenko. I'm thinking Chael Sonnen. You know why? Because Chael Sonnen perfectly encapsulates why there's no unionization. I'm not hating on Chael Sonnen. I'm not personally attacking Chael Sonnen. I'm not saying Chael Sonnen is the reason why there's no unionization, but his career encapsulates why there is no unionization. And the reason for that is because fighters are always looking out for themselves. You're always upselling yourself. A lot of UFC, Chael Sonnen made a career over upselling himself. Conor McGregor upsells himself. Floyd Mayweather upsells himself. Colby Covington shtick and Ben Askren and right now what Jorge Masvidal is doing, they're constantly upselling themselves. They're promoting themselves. They're promoting their brand so they get more opportunities to make more money and more fights. Good for them. I congratulate Chael Sonnen for being able to upsell himself and get himself in a financial position that he wouldn't have had if he were just shut up. I'm happy for Chael for doing that for himself. If I was in his position, I would not regret a single thing I did. Not. But note, that's the issue right there. Fighters are more focused on upselling themselves than they do upselling everyone else. We got Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, Tony Ferguson, Khabib Nurmagomedov. We got fighters talking down other fighters, not supporting one another in terms of negotiating contracts. And here's the truth, they don't have to. Fighters don't have to support one another. You can be Tyron Woodley and ignore all the other fighters and just be focused on the Tyron Woodley brand. The same thing with Conor McGregor. He can ignore everything else and just push Proper 12 as much as he wants. But because Conor McGregor is just upselling himself, he's not upselling any of the other fighters. And if all the fighters can upsell each other, cutting a promo and making yourself look like a total idiot doesn't upsell the other person. It just doesn't. You're upselling the pay-per-view, you're upselling the fights, you're upselling people's intrigue of the fights, but for the most part, you're upselling yourself. In the National Basketball Association, like LeBron, Chris Paul, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, it doesn't matter who you are in the NBA, you have to support each other there. You have to be good with each other because you all want to make money. Everyone from the NBA wants to make money. It doesn't matter that I don't like you on the other side of the court. It doesn't matter that I elbowed you on the court. It doesn't matter I trash talked you in the court. It doesn't matter that my team beat your team. It doesn't matter that my team beating your team hurt your legacy. I want to make money. You want to make money. Let's work together in this. When we're in the octagon or when we're in the basketball court, we will compete and we will try to defeat each other. But outside it, we are going to try to upsell one another in order for both of us to go make money. Not just upsell, hey everyone, you guys should go watch the Laker-Clipper game because there's a feud between the Lakers and Kawhi Leonard and LeBron James in the history. No, I don't mean that kind of upselling. I mean, hey, guess what? This athlete over here in the LA Clippers who lives right next door to me, yeah, this guy should make this much amount of money. Okay? Yeah, it's none of my business, but I'm a fellow athlete just like him. We should support one another. I'm not seeing any of that. In the NBA, you have players vouching for one another, hoping that they get contract and hoping they make money. UFC, alright, my goal is to make my own money. It gets really frustrating that fighters are complaining about, hey, fighters should make more money. Then why don't you actually support one another? Why don't you together create a unionization and do something about it? But they're not going to do that because in order to do so, you have to actually work alongside together. Not only work alongside together, you have to stop acting and pretending to be like the next Muhammad Ali. It gets ridiculous, alright? It's not necessary. You're upselling yourself. Congratulations. But you're not helping the actual sport. You're not helping the organization by doing that. If you want to make your own money and just be focused on your own priorities, good. But don't do this thing where you're like, I want all fighters to succeed. But you're not actually making the effort to hope that all fighters succeed in making a lot of money. All you care about is how much money is going inside your wallet. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back after the short break.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. So I discussed the new news coming out of Dana White. We have UFC 251 coming in at the now known Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. We got 4 fight cards coming up in the month of July. I'm very excited for it. We're still unsure on what the status is for fighters of John Jones, Conor McGregor, and Jorge Masvidal, but now we can only wait. Though since it is 2020, we're halfway through 2020, thank goodness, because this year has not been all that bueno. But we are nearing the 10-year anniversary of UFC 115. To those of you who know, what happened at UFC 115, which took place June 12th, 2010? Well, It took place in Vancouver, Canada, had 17,000 people of attendance, 4,000 at its total gate, by a rate of 520,000 here. The main event of this card was Rich Ace Franklin versus Chuck Liddell. And here's the interesting thing. No title fights. Can you believe that? The marketing of Chuck Liddell and Rich Ace Franklin is so big that this pay-per-view had no need for title fights. Which is insane because as of right now, it is pretty much expected that every UFC show should have a title fight at a major pay-per-view, but not in this scenario here. So, reading the card here, we got Rich Ace Franklin defeating Chuck Liddell via KO in the first round, 4 minutes and 55 seconds in. Mirko Cro Cop defeated Pat Barry via submission rear naked choke. Very surprising there. Martin Kampmann versus Paul Thiago. So far, it's so interesting knowing that Martin Kampmann had such a long career within the UFC. Big Ben Rothwell defeated Gilbert Yvel. Big Ben Rothwell, he won his recent fight against Ovince St. Preux, OSP. And really, like, in the way how I viewed it, Ben Rothwell's still a really good fighter. He still really is. Now, he's nowhere near top 5 in the rankings of the heavyweight division. I don't expect him to compete at the top 5 rankings or the high rankings of the heavyweight division as of right now in 2020. But Ben Rothwell, still right now, is a dangerous fighter. He's an absolute dangerous, and he took on a very game opponent in OSP, Ovince St. Preux, who really looked a lot better than he has in his recent fights moving up to heavyweights. Like, OSP is one of the best fighters in the light heavy division, and when he moved up to heavyweights, he looked a lot better. He looked a lot more smooth, a lot more clean. I was very impressed by OSP, but even more impressed that Ben Rothwell, being the bigger guy than OSP, this was a lot more faster. Ben Rothwell is one of those like deceptively faster fighters who, although he physically looks like a dad. He has a dad bod physique. He's round. He's kind of a quirky dude. He doesn't look like he hits hard. He has skinny arms, skinny legs, big trucker body. Doesn't look all that intimidating. But he moves like a middleweight. Ben Rothwell is surprisingly quick. He's faster than he actually looks. And it's so interesting to see here back at 2010 when Brandon Rothwell was working his way up into being a contender. Ben Rothwell right now, even though I don't expect him to compete at the top 5 rankings, he's a dangerous threat in the top 10. 6 through 10, he's a danger, and he can go defeat anybody who's ranked 6 through 10. And so it was very interesting to see that OSP versus Ben Rothwell. Like, Ben Rothwell was the first matchup against OSP, and which was the worst option, because Rothwell still now, 10 years later, is a dangerous fighter. Note, the first fights of the main card for this UFC show, 10 years ago, was Carlos Condit versus Rory McDonald. Right now, Carlos Condit versus Rory McDonald could headline any mixed martial arts event out there. Without a doubt, Carlos Condit is a young Carlos Condit and a young Rory McDonald. If you were to bring the Rory McDonald that was around in 2015, and they had the Carlos Condit that was around like 2013, 2015 also, those two would create fireworks. It won Fight of the Night this show. Fight of the Night came up. Carlos Condit was Rory McDonald. Knockout of the Night was Rich Franklin. Submission of the Night, which is very interesting. Submission of the Night came to Mirko Cro Cop. This main card was stacked from top to bottom with really good fighters. And a lot of good fighters that ended up being journeymen here. And note, once again, this card didn't have a single championship fight. It just didn't. From my recollection, when me and my friends were watching a lot of UFC, Chuck Liddell was the biggest thing. Even though I think I was around, so it was 2010. No, actually, even before 2010, when I was a lot younger, during the mid-2000s for the UFC, at that point, I was in middle school. I was in middle school or early, like, sophomore year high school. But a lot of kids were talking about Mauricio Shogun Rua, Chuck Liddell, Rich Franklin, Rashad Evans. People were constantly talking about those four fighters more than anyone else. It was insane. There were moments in science class where this professor would be like, "Okay, students, ask me any question at all." And then some student would raise their hand up and be like, "Hey, who do you think would win in a fight, Mauricio Shogun Rua or Lyoto Machida?" Now, right now, in 2020, it's hard for me to imagine that, because there really was this huge boom period for mixed martial arts. Now, UFC is still incredibly popular now. It's still incredibly popular. People would easily recognize fighters like Daniel Cormier or Francis Ngannou. They would recognize Chuck Liddell. They would. I don't think people would recognize Israel Adesanya. I don't really think so. But a lot of people, like Chuck Liddell, Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida, Mauricio Gunhua, like these fighters were incredibly popular during this time frame. And this really was the beginning of the downturn for Chuck Liddell during this time. I think this was also when Chuck Liddell it's after his peak. It was after his peak, and then he started competing with the likes of Keith Jardine and lost. Yeah, that to me is really when Chuck Liddell went down. But Rich Franklin is such an interesting guy. He, to me, has to be the most underrated champion in the history of the UFC. And I think he's a great role model. Rich Franklin was a great role model for the UFC, especially during those early days, because the stigma, 90s MMA fighters versus Rich Franklin doesn't look like he belongs in the octagon. He just doesn't, especially if you talk to the guy or when you hear him listen. He was a math teacher. And being a person who also has a degree in education, a background in education and teaching, and also being a person who actually has taught children, it is very interesting to see that a person can be both a fighter and he's the first fighter I know to be both a fighter and have an alternative way of making money. It's the same reason why I am really happy I was really happy for Felicia Spencer when she was an online tutor. Now, she stopped being an online tutor in order to pursue bigger goals in mixed martial arts, which is really sad considering the fact that, you know, online tutoring is a big thing. Online teaching is a very important thing right now in 2020 because of the coronavirus pandemic. I was taught to learn before the coronavirus pandemic. I myself was taught how to teach, how to do online instruction, or how to teach people via Google Meets or Hangouts and Zoom. Like I took courses on the idea of teaching people via your computer, via a laptop, via your phone, or being able to communicate with students with like iPads and stuff. So I love fighters like Rich Franklin and Felicia Spencer who have an alternative way of making money. Because right now in 2020, it's sad it's still happening here, but a lot of fighters are constantly complaining about how much money they're making, and I always say Donald Cerrone has to be the smartest man in the UFC. Even though Donald Cerrone hasn't won a belt, he has to be one of the smartest men in all of the UFC, just because he makes the very most out of his career. Gilbert Burns, I can guarantee you, has made more money, or is going to make more money than any other fighter in the UFC in the year of 2020 or in recent years. I really believe that. Because Gilbert Burns, I'm pretty sure he's going to fight, once he fights Kumaru Usman, that means he fought 3 times in the span of a year. And we're only halfway done with the year. So Gilbert Burns can go and fight maybe once or 2 times this year. And if you think about it, if he's making $100K per fight, he could potentially make well over $500,000 in this 1 year, which pretty much sets him up for life. And he can go and renegotiate even further and make guaranteed money later on. It's a good thing for Gilbert Burns. I'm really happy for him. Actually, another thing, here's a reported buyout. Rich Franklin made $140,000 with his base pay of $70,000. The base pay for the winner of the main event of this card was $70,000. And that's not including taxes being written off. And then you have Chuck Liddell, who was making $500,000 base pay. Co-main event. The co-main event loser, Pat Barry, made $11,000. And we got Rory McDonald in this card made $8,000. Fighters have always been underpaid. And seriously, a lot of fighters should band together and go for unionization if they want to make more money. They don't have to, but it would be really nice if they did. And that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.GSMC.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.